Do you like epic games, games that tell a story? Do you look for these unique PlayStations that you'll remember for 20 years? Hello fellow gamers, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu and you're watching my series of videos where I tackle the rules of heavy games. And not only the rules, also some few basic strategies to help you feel comfortable at the game table. So here we go, it's time to overcome my delicious French accent and take a seat together in front of that heavy game box. Welcome my friends, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu. And today let's dive together into the world of wargames, a world made of hexagons and cardboard counters, but not only. Because today's wargame is famous for being quite an oddity. So let me introduce you to the Guns of Gettysburg from Rachel Simmons, published by Mercury Games. And this is its gorgeous map. As you can see, no hexagons. It looks like the original battle map on General Meade's or Robert E. Lee's table. And players use wooden sticks to depict their battalions, just like in your history books. And as you will see, even the rules of the game are very different from what we are used to see. No resolution tables, no attack or movement value, not even dice. This game is a unique piece of jewelry that you've never seen before and that you'll never see again anywhere else. Of course, it is about the Battle of Gettysburg, the turning point of the American Civil War, between July the 1st and the 3rd of 1863 in Pennsylvania, as General Robert E. Lee and his Confederate Army of North Virginia is intercepted by the Union Army of the Potomac under General George Meade's command. And so in this series of videos, let me explain in detail the complete rule set for this game. My goal, as usual, is that after watching my videos, you'll be able to sit at your game table and play the game. It's as simple as that. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. Here are the two belligerent armies. The Union Army is divided into 7 corps, each corps being represented by 3 wooden blocks, plus 2 cavalry divisions made of 2 blocks each. The Confederate Army has a different structure, with 3 corps, each of which being divided into 3 divisions of 2 blocks. In game terms, each block represents roughly the same strength, so if we compare their sheer strength, with 21 blocks versus 18, the Union Army seems stronger. But of course, as we will see, things are not so simple. Perhaps you noticed that no artillery can be seen in both armies. That's because artillery in this game is represented as special artillery tokens, triangular tokens that players keep secret in their hand like playing cards. As you can see, these artillery tokens are related to corps or specific commands. More on that later. On the map, players keep their forces secret. Blocks lay face down, and only the owning player can peek at his block's identity. Blocks are always lined up on a line. The map is divided into areas of different shapes and sizes. These areas are bordered by positions. This is how we call the lines between areas. And they are called positions because that's where blocks are put. A block is always on a position, that is, on a line, never inside an area. Okay, enough generalities, let's get into the details and see right away how we can move our troops. The Battle of Gettysburg is played in turns. In general, 1 turn is 1 hour of real time on the battlefield. During a turn, a block can move 2 steps. Moving across an area from a position to another position bordering the same area is 1 step. So, without any special obstacle, with 2 steps, your block can cross 2 areas. And even if the second area, like in this example, is a triangle or whatever its shape, it costs 1 step to cross 1 area. On its position, a block is always behind the line drawn on the map. Here, for example, the red block is facing to the right. As we will see, this is important for combat and field of fire, but for movement it doesn't matter. For example, if we want to move our red block to the left, it is always 2 steps for 2 areas in one turn, even if it moves to its rear. And note that it makes some kind of steep curve in the second area, and it's okay. It's 1 step to cross one area from one position to another, whatever position it is. And on the destination position, it can choose to stop on one side of its position or the other. For the same total cost of 2 steps, he can freely choose its final orientation. Okay, it's fine, but sometimes some difficult terrain can hinder your movement. This is called obstructed terrain, and in fact, it is mainly woods. An obstructed position is shown as a small double line, and crossing this obstructed terrain costs 1 more step. And beware, note like in this example that this double line is on one side of the position, so that it hinders movement only in this direction. Here, the position is obstructed to the left, but not to the right. So for this block, it costs 2 steps to cross its front area, but only 1 step to cross its rear area. Some positions have obstructed terrain in both orientations, to the front and to the rear. Several other little icons can be found on the map, small guns, small triangles, but they are related to combat and fire, and they don't hinder movement at all. Now look at this example. This Confederate block would like to move from its current position to this position through one area. But there is an obstructed symbol on both its starting and ending positions, both being oriented toward the area the block wants to cross. 1 movement step to cross the area, plus 1 more step per obstructed symbol, that gives 3 steps for this movement. And so there is an exception for this particular case. If you cross 2 obstructed symbols inside the same area, you get only plus 1 step. That means this movement is 2 steps only. And finally, 3 more examples to be absolutely sure you get it. All these moves are regular 2-step moves. Put this video on pause if needed and take a little time to look at it. You can have up to 3 blocks on the same position. For the moment, their order doesn't matter. The only restriction is that they all must be on the same side of their position. In other words, they must all face the same direction. And note also that there is no special bonus for moving on a road. Roads will only give benefits for reinforcements. More on that later. Okay, so movement seems quite easy in this game. But what you have to know is that obstructed terrain is not your worst obstacle. In fact, what hinders movement the most is the enemy. Simple. As soon as one of your blocks enters a position adjacent to an enemy block, it must stop. If this Confederate block enters this position, it cannot go further because it is adjacent to a Union block. Adjacent means that both blocks share an endpoint. That's how we call the circle at the end of every position segment. And it's true even if the enemy block is oriented the other way. So your block is stopped even if it is in its opponent's rear. And worse than that, as soon as 2 opposing blocks are adjacent, neither of them can move anymore. Here, both blue and red blocks cannot move anymore. And that's also true with fields of fire. As we will see just now, every block casts a field of fire. That is a zone where it can fire. That doesn't mean that it will actually fire on the enemy block, but just that its field of fire will stop enemy movement. What is a field of fire? Basically, it's the area in front of the block. This blue union block's field of fire is this blue zone. And so, because red block just entered a position that touches this zone, it must stop and cannot move anymore. And note that the same is true in reverse. Blue block is touching red block's field of fire, so blue block must stop and cannot move anymore. Obstructed positions doesn't allow any field of fire. Obstructed positions are trees and your gun cannot fire through trees. So, if the red block is here instead, it doesn't cast any field of fire anymore because of the obstructed symbol in front of it, and it no longer prevents blue block from moving. And note that blue block still casts its own field of fire, so that in this example, red block cannot move while blue block can move freely. Note also that the orientation of the obstructed symbol does matter. Here, for example, red block casts a field of fire because the obstructed symbol on its position is valid only toward its rear. And then there are ridges. A ridge is an elevated position that allows to threaten a larger area. On the map, a ridge is a position with a small gun icon, or several guns. For field of fire consideration, the number of guns doesn't matter. From a ridge, the field of fire is always the area in front of the position, plus the two areas adjacent to it on both sides of the ridge position. In this example, thanks to the ridge, red block can stop this blue block movement. And note that in this case again, blue block is stopped, but not red block. Some special cases can seem a little strange because of the geometry of areas, so just follow the basic rule. A field of fire from a ridge fills the front area and then extends both sides to the adjacent areas. Thanks to the ridge, this red block stops all these blue blocks. Note that even this last blue block is stopped, regardless of the obstructed symbol in front of it. The block cannot move as soon as its position touches an enemy field of fire. In this example, the front area has a very odd shape, and with the ridge, it can extend only to one side, because on the other side, there is no adjacent area. To be adjacent, an area must touch the front area, but also one of the endpoints of the ridge position. This green area couldn't be in red block's extended field of fire because it doesn't touch one of its endpoints. This other green zone could not either because it doesn't touch red block's front area. Beware, this kind of extension of the field of fire, thanks to a ridge, cannot happen through an obstructed position. Here, red block's field of fire extends to its left, but not to its right because of the obstructed symbol on the position between front area and the adjacent area. And you will notice that the obstruction symbol's orientation doesn't matter. No extension of the field of fire either through another ridge position. Here, the field of fire doesn't extend to the right because of the ridge symbol between front area and its adjacent right area. The number and orientation of the gun symbols don't matter. And finally, a field of fire cannot be extended through a friendly unit. In this example, the red block's field of fire can extend through blue enemy unit, but not through red. Okay, from now on, you know what are fields of fire and how they hinder movement. Just a few details and exceptions remain. First, triangle symbols have nothing to do with fields of fire. Here, red block's field of fire is only its front area. Sometimes, a special dotted line shows where the field of fire does extend regardless of any other rules. The dotted line supersedes normal rules. For example, here, according to the standard rules, red block's field of fire should only extend to its front area and no adjacent area because of the intervening ridges. But to the right, a dotted line shows that its field of fire extends this way despite the ridge. In this last example, blue unit can move because it is not in red block's extended field of fire, while red unit cannot move because it is in blue's extended field of fire. With 2 steps, blue unit can move like this. 1, 2, it always stays out of red block's field of fire. But on its last position, even if still out of any field of fire, it must stop and cannot move anymore just because it is adjacent to red block. Never forget that movement can be prevented by fields of fire but also by sheer adjacency. And finally, as you will quickly understand, the battle situation will very often end in something like this. 2 lines where no unit can move, all blocks from both sides preventing each other to move thanks to their fields of fire. So what? This is the end of the battle? No, of course, because up to now we just talked about movement. And when movement is not possible anymore, it's time to fight. And this will be the subject of my next video. So take a little rest, a glass of water, a banana, and let's go on with video number 2, combat.